35 biker punches. Female truck driver. Until her military K9s show no mercy. Evelyn Kane just wanted a normal day. A delivery run, a cup of coffee, and her two loyal companions by her side. But when the Black Reaper's bikers rolled into the gas station, shaking down an innocent old man for protection money, she couldn't just walk away. The bikers thought she was just another weak truck driver. They didn't know Evelyn was a veteran, or that Ghost and Titan weren't ordinary dogs. Before we dive in, tell us where you're watching from. If you're enjoying these stories, make sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss the next explosive episode. Evelyn Kane had just wrapped up an unusually early delivery run, guiding her medium-sized truck through the quiet streets of Silverbrook. The day had barely started. The sun was only now peeking over the rooftops, casting elongated shadows across the road. Although tired from the dawn drive, she decided to stop at a small gas station she frequented, one owned by Jim, a kind-hearted man in his 50s who had lived in Silverbrook all his life. Evelyn pulled up to one of the pumps, cut the engine, and glanced at her two canine companions, Ghost and Titan, resting in the front seat. Ghost, a swift and sharp-eyed white canine, lazily lifted his head when the truck rattled to a halt. Titan, the larger dark-furred canine, remained still but fully alert. His ears perked at the slightest sound. Both were ex-military dogs that Evelyn had worked with during her service. Now they accompanied her everywhere, as much family as they were protective partners. The morning felt tranquil, at least initially. Silverbrook's small-town atmosphere was evident in the handful of locals chatting by a few parked cars. Jim's gas station boasted only 2 pumps and a modest convenience store. Whenever Evelyn arrived, Jim greeted her with the same warm smile and a wave, usually asking how her deliveries were going, or offering a cup of fresh coffee. The station was usually a haven of quiet, somewhere to recharge before heading home. Yet that calm would soon be shattered. As Evelyn stepped out of the cab and began fueling her truck, the distant rumble of motorcycles cut through the silence. She paused, vaguely unsettled by the noise. A quick glance across the lot revealed nothing unusual, just a couple of townsfolk chatting near Jim's front door. Another glance at Ghost and Titan told her they'd also sensed something. Ghost, especially, had risen onto all fours, peering out the windshield with intense curiosity. Within moments, 5 large motorcycles roared into the station's parking lot, their sleek black finishes gleaming under the early sunlight. Their riders wore matching black leather jackets, emblazoned with the image of a skull and a curved scythe. Evelyn knew these symbols. This was the emblem of the Black Reapers, a biker gang rumored to have a growing presence in Silverbrook. She'd heard hushed talk of them extorting money from local businesses, but she hadn't expected to meet them so soon, or at Jim's station. Of all places, her heart sank. This didn't look like a casual pit stop. Their aggressive body language alone spelled trouble. Their leader, a tall, imposing man with a deep scar along his left cheek, dismounted and sauntered over to the payment counter. 3 others followed while one stayed on his bike, engine still idling. Evelyn tried to remain composed, but alarm bells rang in her head. She knew trouble when she saw it, and trouble had arrived in force. She kept pumping gas a moment longer, trying to assess the situation from a distance. Jim, standing by the counter inside the small kiosk, appeared visibly nervous as the scarred man leaned over. From her vantage point, Evelyn couldn't hear the exact words, but she recognized the posture of intimidation, fists placed on the counter, leaning in, commanding presence. The other bikers hovered near the door, blocking any chance of escape or outside intervention. Evelyn felt a surge of protective instinct. Memories of her military days flashed through her mind. Moments when she'd witnessed bullies or insurgents pressuring the helpless. She left the pump, shut the truck's fuel cap, and took a quick glance at Ghost and Titan. She made a subtle hand gesture, signaling them to stay for now. Titan gave a low rumble, but stayed put, while Ghost cocked his head, eyes never leaving the bikers. Evelyn walked steadily toward the kiosk, each step purposeful, her boots crunching on the gravel. She could see Jim's face more clearly now, fear etched into his features. The tall biker with the scar was evidently the leader, barking orders at Jim. Evelyn overheard bits and pieces. "You got our fee, old man," the biker growled. "No more stalling. If you want this station to stay pretty, You'd better pay up, Jim's voice trembled as he tried to explain. He didn't have enough money. Another biker, shorter but stocky with thick arms, smirked at Jim's obvious terror. Evelyn's blood boiled. This was a classic shakedown. She'd seen it 1,000 times. Always the same script, just different cast members. Drawing closer, she spoke up, her tone calm yet laden with quiet authority. "Excuse me, I must be hearing things wrong. Are you really forcing an old man to pay for something that doesn't exist?" Instantly, all eyes turned to her. The leader's lip curled in a disdainful sneer. The shorter biker snorted. One of the gang's bigger members cracked his knuckle, an unsubtle threat. Evelyn, maintaining a steady posture, met the leader's gaze without flinching. He tilted his head, focusing on her. For a moment, he seemed amused. "You lost. Lady, this isn't your business," Evelyn offered a slight shrug. Stepping closer to Jim's side of the counter, she refused to let them box her in, positioning herself so she had room to maneuver if the situation escalated. "It becomes my business when decent people get strong-armed." The big man, presumably the leader, smirked. "Name's Dagger," he said, tapping the scythe and skull emblem on his jacket. "We don't like interruptions." Two of his men advanced, wanting to test her resolve. The crowd of onlookers outside, which included a few local folks and passers-by, watched in stunned silence. Some even backed away, not wanting to be involved. Jim took a trembling step back, as though expecting a fight to break out at any moment. Evelyn glanced at the men stepping toward her. "I'm just a driver," she said, voice unwavering. "But if you think that means I'll let you bully Jim here, you're mistaken." The men didn't like that. One of them barked, "This is none of your concern." "Back off before you regret it," Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "You should step away while you can." As expected, these words only fueled their anger. The shorter of the two snarled. "Think you're tough, huh?" She caught the faint metallic glint on his knuckles, brass knuckles hidden under gloves. Perhaps the tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Dagger stood aside, clearly eager to see how his men handled this insolent woman. He wore an unreadable expression, as though this was a trivial matter he expected to end in seconds. Evelyn might have been a curious diversion to him, but she had no plans to be anyone's diversion. The shorter biker stepped forward first, attempting to grab Evelyn's wrist to push her away from the kiosk. Evelyn reacted instantly, channeling reflexes honed by years of close combat drills in the military. She pivoted, gripping his hand while twisting her own wrist free. In one fluid motion, she wrenched his arm behind his back, sending him crashing to one knee. He let out a strangled cry of pain, his face contorting in shock at how fast she neutralized him. The second biker, a tall brute with a shaved head, lunged. He swung a wild punch aimed at her shoulder. Evelyn released the first man's arm, dropped her stance, and snapped a forceful kick into the tall man's midsection, knocking the wind out of him. He stumbled backward, losing balance. Before he could recover, Evelyn pivoted, sweeping his legs out from under him with a low, controlled sweep. He slammed onto the pavement with a dull thud. Onlookers gasped. Even Jim, who'd seen her handle an aggressive drifter once before, looked taken aback by her skill. No firearms, no fancy weapons, just raw technique. She was neither showy nor hesitant. Each move was deliberate, aiming to incapacitate without causing unnecessary damage. A few of the local townspeople who'd witnessed the scuffle appeared simultaneously terrified and awed. The shorter man she'd locked up earlier managed to scramble to his feet, massaging his wrenched shoulder. His eyes flicked between Evelyn and Dagger, uncertainty creeping across his face. He wasn't sure if he should try again or retreat. The battered tall biker spat out a curse, rolling onto his side, but made no immediate move to stand. Evelyn didn't step back. Her posture indicated readiness for more, but she didn't appear triumphant, merely resolute. The crowd parted slightly, giving her space, as though collectively acknowledging who held the upper hand. Jim trembling behind the counter. He looked at Evelyn like she was a one-woman SWAT team. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Instead, he simply nodded in gratitude and disbelief. Dagger had watched the entire exchange with narrowed eyes. He gave a curt laugh, though there was clear tension in his voice. "Not bad for a truck driver," he muttered. Evelyn said nothing, her gaze unwavering, waiting to see what he would do next. She'd fought 2 of them already, but there were still more in the group, not to mention Dagger himself. She quietly hoped the display of close-quarters combat skill would discourage further violence, but she had a sinking feeling that the real threat was yet to come. The tall, scarred man took a slow, measured step forward. One corner of his mouth twisted into a half-smile. "You've got moves," he said, "but let's see how you handle this." Evelyn, wincing from the sting in her face, steadied herself. "Ghost! Enough!" she commanded in a firm, clear tone. Ghost kept his jaws locked a moment longer, then released at her second command, retreating a couple of steps, but remaining ready to pounce again if Dagger moved aggressively. Dagger clutched his bleeding arm, cursing under his breath. His eyes flicked from Evelyn to the dogs, a tempest of fury and pain swirling in his glare. One of his men took a cautious step forward, but froze when Titan fixed him with a threatening stare. The tables had turned dramatically, from a simple extortion attempt to a humiliating fiasco at the hands of a single woman and her 2 lethal K9s. Evelyn didn't relax her stance just yet, fully aware the threat might not be over. Dagger, though furious, realized there was little he could do without risking further injury or defeat. He pressed his free hand against the bleeding wound on his forearm, lips pressed in a tight line. He threw Evelyn a venomous look. "You'll regret this," he growled, voice low and seething with anger. She watched silently as he signaled to his men. They hastily mounted their bikes, one still wincing, another limping, and revved the engines. Dagger settled onto his own ride with a glare that promised retribution. Then, in a roar of exhaust, the Black Reapers tore out of the gas station lot, leaving a cloud of dust and tension in their wake. Jim exhaled shakily, stepping from behind the counter. He thanked Evelyn, voice trembling with relief. Yet beneath that relief lay a glimmer of dread. He knew the Black Reapers were dangerous, and that Evelyn might have just become their prime target. Evelyn, hand still raised to rub her bruised cheek, simply nodded. She could feel eyes on her, townspeople both awed and afraid. Trouble had found her, and she suspected this was only the beginning. The sun had barely cleared the horizon when Dagger and his fellow Black Reapers roared away from the gas station, humiliation and anger coursing through their veins. The morning light did little to temper the resentment brewing in Dagger's mind. His arms still throbbed from the deep bite Ghost had inflicted on him, a stinging reminder that a single female truck driver and her 2 dogs had utterly humiliated him before half the town. As they sped toward the outskirts of Silverbrook, the sense of quiet farmland and dormant industrial lots gave way to a looming structure, a massive abandoned warehouse, rust creeping over its metal siding like ivy. This dilapidated building served as the Black Reapers' primary lair, deep within a neglected industrial park that had been deserted for years. Broken windows, high weeds, and corroded fences made for an unwelcoming sight. But for the Reapers, it was perfect. Inside, rows of motorcycles were lined up like trophies. Various crates, many of them unmarked, were scattered around the cavernous interior. Some concealed firearms or ammunition. Others possibly held stolen goods or contraband. Dim overhead lights and the stale scent of oil, sweat, and old metal greeted the bikers the moment they killed their engines and trudged in. Dagger stormed off his motorcycle, clutching his injured forearm. Blood had clotted around the crescent-shaped bite wound. Several Reapers trailed close behind, giving him nervous glances but saying nothing. Dagger, despite the stinging pain, snatched off his leather jacket and threw it onto a nearby table. He paced between crates, eyes wild with fury, occasionally shooting a murderous look at any subordinate who lingered too long. One of the Reapers, a lanky man with a patch that read "Knox," quietly shut the main warehouse door behind them. He was considered Dagger's right hand, clever, calculating, and far more cautious than the rest. A hush fell over the group, each member acutely aware of the storm raging behind Dagger's eyes. When he finally spoke, his voice rang out with unmasked wrath. "Who the hell does she think she is?" Dagger barked, slamming his fist against an oil-stained tabletop. "A damn truck driver playing hero, and she humiliated us in front of half the town." He kicked a nearby folding chair, sending it skidding across the concrete floor. 2 Reapers stepped back, not wanting to provoke him. No one dared respond until Knox cleared his throat. He stood off to one side, arms folded, scanning Dagger carefully. "Look, boss," Knox began, choosing his words with care. "We can't just charge in headlong again. Clearly she's got some training. Maybe even military." Dagger scowled, remembering the swift moves she had used against his men. His pride still stung, but the practical side of him knew Knox was right. Evelyn had proven formidable. They couldn't risk another public fiasco. "Fine," Dagger spat, lowering his voice a fraction. "We won't face her in broad daylight, and we won't let her dogs tear us apart again. We'll make her pay like the Black Reapers do, where she least expects it." He paused to flex his wounded arm, wincing at the jolt of pain. The thought of how easily Ghost had latched onto him burned in his mind. He wanted revenge, and not just for the embarrassment. He wanted those dogs taken out of the equation. Evelyn might be a thorn in his side, but those K9s were the real wild card. Knox nodded, understanding Dagger's move. "It'll be simpler if we separate her from the dogs," he proposed in a measured tone. "She's clearly attached to them and they're well trained. If we can isolate one, that would weaken her advantage." Dagger's scowl curled into a mirthless grin. "Exactly, and once we have our hands on at least one of those damn mutts, I'll make sure Evelyn Kane regrets ever crossing us." Suddenly, the heavy clang of the warehouse's makeshift iron door sliding open echoed through the space. One of the Reapers who'd been posted outside strode in with an uneasy expression. "Boss," he murmured, "someone's here to see you, says he's from the cartel." A palpable tension seized the room. The Black Reapers weren't strangers to criminal networks, but Crimson Serpent's cartel was a different beast entirely. Their reputation for ruthlessness and far-reaching influence commanded a fear even in men like Dagger. He cast a wary look at Knox, who returned a grim nod. Then he addressed the Reaper. "Let him in." A hush fell as a figure stepped inside. A man of about 38, wearing a crisp black shirt, dark trousers and polished shoes that contrasted with the Reaper's rough biker attire. He had short, slicked-back hair, and a pair of tinted glasses reflected the flickering overhead lights. In one hand, he carried a small bottle of imported liquor, as though it were a casual housewarming gift. Carlos Mendoza radiated confidence and calm, a kind of icy poise that silently demanded respect. He surveyed the row of Reapers, unimpressed by their attempts at intimidation. Dagger could practically feel the man sizing him up before speaking. "So," Carlos began softly, "I hear you had some difficulties in town." Dagger stiffened. He despised being reminded of his defeat, especially by an outsider, but he also knew better than to act tough with a cartel envoy. "A small complication, that's all," Dagger replied, struggling to keep the anger from his voice. Carlos casually set the liquor bottle on the table, poured himself a finger's worth, and took a deliberate sip. Then, setting the glass aside, he gave a low hum of disapproval. "My people, Crimson Serpents, do not care about petty scuffles," he said, every word carrying lethal undertones. "But we've caught wind of a certain Evelyn Kane, a female truck driver, and her two K9s." His gaze swept the room. "Those dogs in particular are a concern. Military-trained K9s can be quite valuable, or problematic." Knox cleared his throat. "We didn't realize the cartel had any stake in dogs." A thin smile curved across Carlos's face. "We have a stake in any potential weapons, flesh and blood, or metal and gunpowder. I'm here because we're developing something special, a program to enhance certain K9's abilities. Let's say, we want at least one of those two K9s in our possession, so I expect you to deliver." Silence choked the air. The Reapers exchanged uneasy glances. Everyone knew what it meant to fail a request from the cartel. If they couldn't do the job, they'd likely find themselves replaced. Or worse. Dagger mustered a gruff reply, ignoring the throbbing ache in his arm. "We'll get you what you want," he promised. "We're already planning to settle the score with Evelyn. And if those dogs are so important to you, we'll bring you one, maybe both." Carlos inclined his head, though his expression barely softened. "Ensure you don't disappoint us." He finished his drink in a slow gulp, then placed the glass down. "We need a live specimen for our project. Healthy, if possible, so try not to kill it in your attempts." Something inside Dagger churned with disgust at the idea of the cartel's meddling with animals, but he forced a compliant grin. "We'll do our best." With a final glance around the warehouse, Carlos stepped away, leaving a sharp final warning. If you fail, he lifted a single finger. Crimson Serpents will handle things personally, and trust me, you won't like that outcome. He strode out, leaving behind a tense, oppressive silence. The Reapers, usually so brash and loud, looked uncomfortably at one another. Even Dagger, fueled by vengeance, seemed rattled. He waited until he was sure Carlos was out of earshot, before letting out a held breath. Knox exhaled. We got ourselves into something big, boss. Dagger spat onto the floor. Doesn't matter. Cartel wants a dog. We'll get it. And we'll send the Mevelin's head on a platter if she tries to resist. Once Carlos was gone, the Reapers huddled around a makeshift table beneath a dusty overhead lamp. Dagger stared at the men with unwavering resolve. This is personal now, he declared, voice cold. We not only have a bone to pick with Evelyn, turns out these dogs are a gold mine. We deliver, and the cartel owes us. Knox nodded, folding his arms. But we can't just walk in and fight her in broad daylight again. She has those K9s, and we already saw how lethal they can be. We need a plan that ensures we isolate at least one dog. Dagger glanced down at his bandaged arm, remembering the viciousness of Ghost's bite. A flicker of pain crossed his face, quickly replaced by steel determination. Then we strike at night, at her home, when she least expects it. She'll be off guard, probably asleep. If we force her out of the house, even for a moment, we can grab a dog and disappear.
And if it all goes south? Knox asked in a low voice. She's got guns. We know that. And those dogs. One slip and we could lose men. Dagger's lips twisted into an ugly grin. We'll rig the perimeter with small charges. If anyone tries to follow us with that K9, we blow the route. No pursuit, no trouble. He leaned forward, knuckles pressing against the table, and glared at each Reaper in turn. This time, we won't fail. The last thing I want is that cartel bastard showing up here again, complaining we couldn't handle a single woman and 2 dogs. A murky chorus of assent followed. They were all in, bound by mutual fear of the cartel and their thirst for retribution. Tension filled the air, the kind of nervous excitement that precedes a violent storm. Rising to his full height, Dagger scanned the faces of his men. We're done talking. Tonight, we set the plan in motion. The Reapers broke away to gather materials: guns, chains, sacks of gasoline, and a handful of small explosive devices. A rare sense of seriousness hovered over them, stifling their usual rowdy banter. They were about to move from petty extortion and brawls to a coordinated assault, all under the shadow of the cartel's watchful eye. In a quieter corner of the warehouse, Knox packed a duffel bag with homemade smoke grenades. He paused, brow furrowed, as if pondering the consequences of the upcoming strike. But his loyalty to Dagger and fear of what defiance might bring kept him silent. Dagger, meanwhile, strode to his motorcycle and carefully inspected his sawed-off shotgun. His mind seethed with images of Evelyn kneeling in defeat, Titan subdued, and Ghost being dragged away to fulfill the cartel's twisted experiment. Every twinge in his bitten arm reminded him of the shame he planned to erase. No one humiliates the Black Reapers, he growled under his breath. Night cast a peaceful hush over Silverbrook's outskirts. Evelyn Kane's home sat on the edge of a quiet road, surrounded by a modest fence and a few old oak trees. Inside, she had dozed off on the sofa after a long, stressful day. Titan curled at her feet. Normally, Ghost would be on watch near the front door, but for once, both dogs had decided to rest together. The day's events, her standoff at the gas station, dealing with bruised knuckles and an aching jaw, had left her drained, though her mind remained vigilant. That vigilance was tested around midnight, when a faint clink of metal rattled from somewhere outside. Titan's ears pricked first, followed by a low, rumbling growl deep in his throat. Ghost lifted his head, ears tall and alert. Evelyn stirred at the sound, blinking sleep from her eye. Her instincts flared. She grabbed her phone from the coffee table, quickly unlocking the surveillance app connected to her property's cameras. The screen showed exactly what she feared: the glare of headlights with the silhouettes of multiple motorcycles parked near the back fence. She swiped to another camera. At least 8 or 10 figures moved in the dark, creeping along the fence line. Dagger was there, leading them, his bandaged forearm a menacing reminder of their previous encounter. Knox walked beside him, pointing out vantage point. Several others carried baseball bats,
crowbars, and ominously, a few firearms. One biker silently placed a Molotov cocktail near the porch steps, ready to ignite at any moment. Evelyn's breath caught. There was no question this was a targeted attack. She silently cursed, scrambled upright, and motioned for Titan and Ghost to follow. She pulled a 9mm pistol from a discreet holster attached beneath the sofa and rushed to the window. The motion-sensitive floodlights outside began flickering on, revealing more than half a dozen Reapers fanning out across her yard. She hissed under her breath. "They're attacking from every angle. Damn." While she darted to lock doors and confirm the windows were secure, Titan let out a thunderous bark. She swore the dog could sense the malicious intent in the night air. Ghost's hackles rose, the white K9 bracing for a fight, peeking through another window. Evelyn saw two bikers fiddling with a side door. If they broke in from multiple entry points, she'd be overwhelmed. She needed to go on the offensive. She pressed a button that turned on a row of security lights around the perimeter, hoping to dazzle the intruder. Knox, lurking near the front, gestured for someone else to lob a smoke bomb. Within seconds, thick clouds of gray fog billowed across the porch, reducing visibility for both sides. Titan growled in frustration as the swirling smoke blocked his line of sight. Evelyn steeled herself, heart pounding. This was her home. She'd defend it. She leveled the pistol and fired a warning shot into the night air. The echo reverberated, momentarily halting the Reapers. One or two cursed, hugging the ground. But soon, Dagger's voice cut through the darkness. "Hit them hard. Break down that door." In a swift surge, they advanced on the main entrance. Evelyn flung the door open first, catching them off guard. Titan charged out, teeth flashing as he tackled the closest biker, sending him sprawling off the porch. A wail of pain erupted, but Titan pressed on, thrashing until the man barely struggled. Behind Titan came Ghost, lunging at another biker who swung a bat. Ghost ducked the wild swing and latched onto the man's arm, forcing him to drop the weapon. Evelyn stepped forward, firing two carefully aimed shots. She took down a third biker who'd aimed a gun at Titan, striking the assailant's shoulder. He collapsed with a pained groan. For a fleeting moment, it looked as though Evelyn and the dogs might repel the entire group. Yet the Reapers were more numerous and better armed this time. They quickly adapted. One tossed a tear gas canister into the front yard, while another ignited a Molotov cocktail, hurling it against a side wall. Flames sprang up, though the structure was mostly brick, limiting immediate spread, coughing against the acrid smoke. Evelyn stepped back into the foyer. She shouted for Titan and Ghost to regroup. Titan bolted inside, panting heavily. Ghost hesitated outside. Momentarily cornered by two more bikers, he juked left, then darted right, leaving one man clutching an empty net. Another raised a tranquilizer gun, an unusual weapon among the typical firearms. Evelyn's eyes widened. "Ghost, look out," she screamed, rushing forward. But she was too late. A soft pop sounded as the dart flew. Ghost yelped, stumbling from the impact as the drug coursed through his veins. Evelyn tried to return fire, but two Reapers blindsided her from the side, slamming into her with their shoulders. She slammed into the doorway, losing her grip on the pistol. Titan snarled ferociously and launched at one of the bikers, pinning Evelyn. He clamped onto the man's leg, forcing him to release Evelyn. In the chaos, she scrabbled for her weapon, but a sharp blow to her ribs from another attacker knocked the breath from her lungs. Ghost, half sedated, managed a weak growl but couldn't muster the strength to fight off the pair who seized him. They dragged him away, ignoring his feeble snaps. Evelyn, still reeling, saw the Reapers haul Ghost toward a waiting truck. The dog's normally fierce eyes looked glazed with sedation. "No," Evelyn roared. She lurched to her feet, only to be met by Dagger himself, his face twisted in a sadistic grin. Remembering their earlier confrontation, he drove a brutal punch into her stomach, making her gasp. Another blow struck the side of her head, and she reeled backward, landing hard on the porch. "Thought you were tough," Dagger sneered, looming above her. Titan tried to intervene, but two bulky bikers grappled him, forcing him away. Outside, the night was illuminated by pockets of flames and the eerie flicker of headlights. Evelyn forced herself to stand, despite the throbbing in her ribs. She launched a desperate swing at Dagger, grazing his jaw. He stumbled, cursed. Another Reaper slammed into her side, forcing her back against the doorframe. Her vision blurred with pain. She could only watch, helpless, as Ghost was shoved into the truck's back cab. "We have the dog. Go, go," one of the Reapers barked. Dagger spat blood, glaring at Evelyn. "Next time it'll be you in that truck. Count on it."
With that, he vaulted off the porch and sprinted to his bike. Several Reapers hopped onto theirs, gunning the engines. The truck carrying Ghost tore away, roaring into the darkness. Titan broke free from his captors at the last second, sending one man sprawling, but it was too late. The rest were already fleeing, scattering into the night. Evelyn staggered, left with the wreckage. Smoke swirled around the yard, and the gutter sizzled from the half-extinguished Molotov's flames. She clutched her bruised ribs, eyes locked on the disappearing taillights. Her heart hammered with rage and terror. Ghost was gone, taken by these men for some unknown, sinister plan. She managed to stumble back inside. Titan pressed close to her, trembling from adrenaline. She found her assault rifle by the couch, but it no longer mattered. The Reapers had vanished into the blackness. Taking Ghost with them, she sank to her knees for a moment. Fists clenched. The mission was clear: recover Ghost, at any cost. Within minutes, the sound of sirens cut through the hush left behind by the Reapers. Blue and red lights danced across the yard. Cops leaped out of their cruisers, weapons drawn, scanning for threats. In the lead was Ethan Hayes, Silverbrook's chief of police. He took one look at the battered house, the scorch marks, and the shattered windows before rushing toward Evelyn. He found her near the front door, leaning against Titan, her face drawn with pain. "Evelyn, are you all right?" he demanded, eyes darting from her bruised cheek to the acrid smoke still rising from the lawn. She could barely speak for a moment, still struggling to catch her breath. Finally, she managed a hoarse reply. They took Ghost." Ethan's jaw tightened. He saw the shattered glass, the bullet casings, and the fresh scorch marks. "Damn it, we'll get him back," he vowed, resting a hand on Evelyn's shoulder. "I promise you we will." Evelyn's eyes shimmered with a mix of anger and desperation. She gingerly touched the spot where Dagger had struck her. Titan let out a low whine, as if sharing her grief. She straightened, ignoring the pain in her ribs. "I'm not letting them get away with this," she said quietly, steel in her voice. "They picked the wrong house to burn." Ethan nodded, scanning the property for any immediate sign of further danger. Several officers fanned out to check for explosives or other traps. The smell of spilled gasoline lingered in the cool night air. At the rear of the house, an officer discovered the remains of a small incendiary device, half ignited but extinguished by the chaotic firefight. Once Ethan was sure the area was secured, he guided Evelyn back inside, helping her onto the sofa. Titan lay at her feet, occasionally letting out a concerned whimper. Evelyn pressed her hand to her side, wincing, but refused medical attention for the moment. "We can't waste time," she insisted. "Ghost might already be en route to wherever those bastards plan on taking him." Ethan understood her urgency. "I'll call for backup. We'll put out an APB on any trucks or bikes traveling out of the county." "But Evelyn," he paused, catching her intense gaze. "I need you to be careful. These people have ties to something bigger, some cartel operation. From what we're hearing." Evelyn exhaled, a wave of exhaustion hitting her. "I suspected as much. They didn't just come to settle a score. They wanted Ghost. That means there's a reason behind it, and that reason is bigger than petty revenge." One of the officers hurried over, handing Ethan a partial license plate number he'd gleaned from a neighbor's camera. It might be enough to start a lead. Another officer beckoned them outside, pointing to footprints and tire tracks that could help track the Reapers. Evelyn stood, ignoring her bruises, and followed Ethan out. The old sense of military discipline kicked in. She'd lost a teammate. She had to regroup, gather intel, and strike back. Titan padded beside her. "Ever vigilant, I promise you, Ethan," Evelyn murmured, eyes scanning the yard where scorched grass and bullet casings lay. "I'm not stopping until Ghost is back safely." Ethan rested a hand on her arm, expression firm. "Nor am I. We'll bring them all down, Reaper. Cartel, whoever tries to stand in the way. We work together." With that, the midnight assault ended. Ghost was gone, leaving Evelyn with a rage that burned hotter than the lingering embers scattered around her yard. As she gazed at Titan's dark silhouette beside her, she whispered a silent vow. The Reapers had started this war. She would finish it, and rescue Ghost from whatever horrors lay ahead. Evelyn had barely slept after the violent midnight assault that left her house in disarray, and Ghost abducted by the Black Reaper. Dawn broke over Silverbrook as she methodically cleaned up shards of glass and dampened the charred grass outside, still grimly aware that none of these chores would bring Ghost back.
Titan seemed equally restless, pacing near the front door, occasionally letting out a low whine, as if expecting his missing companion to reappear at any moment. When her phone buzzed, revealing a message from Ethan Hayes, the town's police chief, Evelyn felt a flicker of hope. The text was brief: "Meet me at the station. We need to talk." She grabbed her jacket, checked the magazine of her sidearm, then whistled softly for Titan to follow. Though her ribs and face still ached from the previous night's confrontation, her determination felt sharper than ever. A tired hush seemed to hang over the Silverbrook Police Department that morning. Officers hovered around computer screens, poring over last night's reports of gunshots, attempted arson, and multiple calls from terrified neighbors who had heard motorcycles raging in the dark. Tension and exhaustion mingled in the air, a stark departure from the usual slow rhythm of this small town station. Evelyn walked in, Titan at her seat. Several officers stole curious glances at the big black K9. They knew something significant had happened last night, but the full details remained murky. A tall deputy with a worried expression directed Evelyn toward Ethan's office. She nodded in gratitude and pushed open the door. Ethan sat behind his cluttered desk, a large map of Silverbrook spread across it. He looked up, relief washing over his features when he saw Evelyn. "Glad you made it," he said, beckoning her inside. "Please close the door." She did so, then moved closer to the desk where Titan settled at her feet. Under the fluorescent lights, she couldn't hide the bruising on her cheek or the exhaustion etched into her eyes. Ethan took note but refrained from remarking on it directly. Instead, he tapped the map. "I've got something," he announced. "We managed to pull surveillance footage from around town last night. The Black Reaper's bikes were spotted heading east, and we have partial license plates on a black pickup truck matching descriptions from your neighbor. We think that might be the truck they used to haul Ghost away." Evelyn exhaled, tension coiling in her shoulders. "So they fled the area." "Possibly, but there's more." Ethan flipped through a folder on his desk. He revealed a series of photographs, many grainy and some slightly out of focus. Evelyn's gaze zeroed in on one, an image of men wearing the Reaper's distinctive skull and scythe patches, loading crates into a battered old van behind a large building. "That's an old warehouse on the eastern outskirts of Silverbrook," Ethan explained. "According to our tips, the Reapers use it as a halfway point, somewhere they store contraband, weapons, maybe even drugs." Evelyn frowned, recalling earlier rumors about the Reapers working for a larger criminal entity. "So they're not just a biker gang throwing their weight around. They're a cog in a bigger machine." Ethan nodded grimly. "Crimson Serpents," he said, voice dropping. "We've suspected for some time that the Reapers funneled dope through Silverbrook on behalf of the cartel. But now, after last night, we have another angle. They're also interested in military dogs. Clearly, Ghost wasn't snatched as mere revenge or leverage. There's a deeper purpose." He opened a second file, revealing disturbing snapshots. Muzzle-bound K9s, bruised and shackled, appearing on some sort of metal tables. Some photos were black and white. Others had a night vision hue, all showing a horrifying truth. Evelyn's hand clenched into a fist at the sight. "Where did you get these?" "A contact from out of state," Ethan replied. "He owed me a favor. The images suggest a group. Likely the cartel has been experimenting on dogs, possibly for clandestine warfare or advanced security. We don't have full intel, but it's enough to confirm we're dealing with something monstrous." Evelyn swallowed hard, rage simmering. Ghost was taken straight into that nightmare. Ethan gently placed a hand on the folder. "Look, I can't be certain if these pictures are from the same operation the Reapers are running here, but the timing is too coincidental. They want K9s for a reason, and we suspect it has everything to do with some twisted experimentation." Evelyn's eyes gleamed with cold resolve. She looked down at Titan, who had grown tense at her feet, as if comprehending the gravity of the conversation. "Then we have no time to lose." Soon after, Ethan led Evelyn to a larger operations board pinned with aerial maps, pinned notes, and lines of yarn connecting known Reaper hangout. He pointed to a circled location, abandoned warehouse, East District. "This place," Ethan said. "Word is, the Reapers frequent it at odd hours. We suspect it's a staging area or supply cache. It might be the best lead on where they're storing their contraband, and maybe clues on where they took Ghost." Evelyn's heart pounded. "Then that's our next stop."
I can't just sit around waiting for them to move him again. Ethan tapped a pencil against the map. We'll do this carefully. We can't risk losing the evidence or tipping them off so they move Ghost to an unknown location. My officers can't storm the place without a warrant, unless we have immediate probable cause. But I can set up surveillance in the area. Evelyn shook her head. That might take too long. Ghost could be gone by then. Or worse. She bent down, gently scratching Titan's neck. Titan can pick up Ghost's scent. If there's any trace of him near that warehouse, we'll know. Ethan hesitated, torn between protocol and the urgent reality. Finally, he nodded. All right, let's go out there. We'll keep it off official channels for now. Just you, me, and Titan. Evelyn slipped her pistol into a concealed holster. No time to wait. A short time later, Ethan drove them in an unmarked police SUV to the eastern outskirts of Silverbrook, a neglected area with shuttered factories, stacked shipping containers, and lonely roads strewn with debris. Evelyn sat in the passenger seat. Titan perched behind them, his keen nose occasionally pressed to the slightly open window. Finally, Ethan slowed the SUV near a chain-link fence that partially surrounded a large, dilapidated building. Spotting no immediate guards, they parked at a safe distance. Evelyn and Titan hopped out. The dog sniffed the air, letting out a low rumble of recognition. While Ethan stayed watchful, Evelyn guided Titan closer to the structure. The dog's ears perked up, and he pulled her toward a gate leading into the property. He's picking up something, Evelyn said, heart thumping at the possibility. I'm sure it's Ghost scent. Ethan kept his hand near his sidearm, scanning the area for any sign of Reapers. We can't just walk in the front door. Let's find a blind spot to slip through. Evelyn's eyes fell on a rusted portion of chain-link fence in the corner. We'll cut our way in there, she decided. She lifted a pair of wire cutters from Ethan's trunk, glancing at him. Once we're inside, we move quietly. Our priority is to find anything related to Ghosts, paper trails, logs, or direct evidence of where they took him. Ethan nodded. I'll cover you. Let's hope we don't run into a dozen armed bikers waiting inside. Evelyn's jaw tightened. If we do, they'll regret it. Titan let out a faint bark of agreement. Late that night, Evelyn and Titan returned to the same neglected area near the old warehouse. This time, they were prepared for a stealth operation. Ethan stood by a parked sedan down the street, ready to provide backup through a discreet comm channel on Evelyn's earpiece. The plan was straightforward. Slip in under the cover of darkness, gather intel, slip out, preferably without triggering a firefight that could destroy crucial evidence or get them both killed. The chain-link fence Evelyn had identified earlier was still mostly untouched. By moonlight, she knelt beside the corroded portion. With Titan close, she used a small set of wire cutters to open a gap big enough for them to crawl through. The night air smelled of rust and stale oil. She paused, listening. Only the distant hum of traffic and the occasional drip of water from a half-collapsed gutter. Ethan's voice crackled softly in her earpiece. All clear from my angle. See any guards? Evelyn scanned the dark yard. A couple of lights were on near the warehouse's loading docks, but no obvious patrols. Doesn't look like it, she whispered. But that doesn't mean there aren't watchers inside. With Titan's body pressed low to the ground, Evelyn advanced, keeping her footsteps silent. They reached a side door half covered by stacked pallets and crates. Carefully, Evelyn tried the handle. Locked. She pulled a slim pry bar from her bag, and after a few deft moves, the lock snapped. Titan stood alert behind her, his ears perked and nostrils flaring. Inside, the place was a maze of corridors and cavernous rooms littered with half-filled crates. The musty smell of old concrete and lingering chemicals drifted through the air. Evelyn suspected that if the Reapers were involved in any shady deals, drugs, guns, or something else, this was likely a central hub, but she had one objective overshadowing all else.
Find clues about Ghost's whereabouts. They carefully made their way along a narrow hallway. Titan sniffed the floor, occasionally pausing to let out a quiet grunt, as though trying to pick up a familiar scent. Evelyn's heart pounded. If Ghost had been here, Titan might lead her right to the place he'd been held, or to any trace of him. Further down the corridor, two men in leather vests stood near a door. Quietly chatting, Evelyn motioned for Titan to stay close. Flattening herself against the wall, she could just make out the Reaper's conversation, a complaint about long shifts and some mention of shipment delays. The words Cerberus Project drifted from one man's lips, piquing Evelyn's immediate interest. The men didn't seem on high alert, but staying hidden was still crucial. Evelyn waited for them to meander deeper into the warehouse, likely toward the main section. Once they were out of earshot, she silently crept forward again. At a small office door, she paused, testing it gently. Unlocked. Slipping inside with Titan, Evelyn found a space that might have once been a foreman's office for legitimate business. Now it was cluttered with Reaper paraphernalia. Helmets, ammo boxes, battered chairs. A single desk lamp cast a weak glow across a messy spread of papers, shipping manifests and scribbled notes. Evelyn rummaged through them, eyes flitting over references to drug runs, payment schedules, and something labeled Cerberus. Her pulse quickened. Evelyn's breath caught when she found a thick manila folder marked Project Cerberus, K9 Enhancements. The heading alone chilled her. She flipped it open, pages and pages of typed text. Diagrams of canine physiology, references to chemical compounds and brain implants. She skimmed a highlighted paragraph. Objective: increase aggression and obedience in military-grade canines. Methods include chemical conditioning, neural implants to suppress free will, and possible genetic modifications for enhanced strength. Target end goal: a specialized canine unit loyal only to Crimson Serpent's cartel, immune to fear or hesitation. Evelyn's stomach tightened in revulsion. So this was why the cartel wanted Ghost and Titan, if they could get him. They were turning dogs into mindless attack drones. A lump rose in her throat as she pictured Ghost bound to a metal table, forcibly injected with who knew what. She inhaled shakily, forcing her emotions under control, and continued scanning. Further in, references to a training site and lab facility caught her eye. The text mentioned a remote location, unnamed, but strongly implied to be far beyond Silverbrook's outskirts, possibly near forested or mountainous terrain. A note scrawled in the margin read, "Delivery of canine specimen 05 expected 2 days post-acquisition." Evelyn grimly realized that specimen 05 might be Ghost. She snapped photos of every page with her phone, wanting to ensure she had evidence. If she could get these documents to Ethan, they could blow the lid off the Reapers and cartel's entire operation. More importantly, she could figure out precisely where Ghost was taken. Suddenly, Titan let out a soft growl from the doorway. Evelyn froze. Footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. She hastily stuffed the folder back into its place, but left it slightly out so it appeared undisturbed. Then she crouched behind the desk, Titan slipping underneath. The footsteps grew louder, accompanied by low voices. 2 Reapers came in, presumably checking the office. One flicked on the overhead light, bathing the cramped space in harsh fluorescence. Evelyn held her breath, crouching lower. Titan remained perfectly still, testament to his rigorous training. "Damn place is dull tonight," one muttered. "No one's around to bother us." "I guess," the other snorted. "We gotta keep watch anyway. Boss said some chick and her dog hammered our guys last night. Word is she's after the one we took." Evelyn's heart pounded, fury threatening to break her calm exterior. She forced herself to remain hidden. If they spotted her now, she'd likely have to shoot her way out, and that could destroy the chance to gather more intel. The Reaper who'd turned on the light plopped onto a battered chair, rifling through some papers. After a minute he shrugged and tossed them aside, missing the incriminating folder by mere inches. "So sick of babysitting crates. If something big doesn't happen soon, I might skip out." The other man chuckled. "Just wait. Cartel's not done with us. They're pumping big money into this Cerberus nonsense. We'll be swimming in cash once they perfect those canine freaks." Evelyn swallowed a growl. She clutched her pistol, cautioning Titan silently with a hand signal to stay put. If either Reaper looked too thoroughly, they might spot her crouched behind the desk. Fortunately, they seemed uninterested. One yawned and grumbled about getting coffee. Eventually, they both got up and wandered out, leaving the overhead light glaring harshly. Evelyn listened to their footsteps recede down the hall before exhaling. Slowly, she emerged from hiding, her heart still hammering. Titan followed, tail stiff with tension. She switched off the overhead light, returning the room to dim lamplit shadows, and quietly made for the door. She had what she needed: the existence of Project Cerberus, references to an off-site lab, and a likely timeline for when Ghost might be transferred or experimented upon.
Slipping back into the corridor, she found it clear. She pressed a finger to her earpiece. "Ethan, I've got intel. Important stuff." His voice came back hushed. "Copy that. Any hostiles around?" Two men just left the office, heading deeper inside. "I should get out before more show up." She paused, noticing a flicker of movement near the loading dock ahead. "We're going to exit by the side door. Keep watch," she whispered. "Understood," Ethan replied. "I'll be ready with the car." Evelyn and Titan crept through the corridors, once again encountering no major resistance. She surmised that the bulk of the Reapers might be out, possibly on runs or patrolling other parts of the county. Luck seemed to be on her side tonight. After ducking past one more guard who stood half asleep near a row of crates, they finally slipped out the side door into the cool night air, back in the warehouse corridors. Though alarm bells began to ring, a few minutes after Evelyn escaped, one of the Reapers who had found the unconscious guards near the entrance realized there had been an infiltration. In a flurry of curses and frantic phone calls, they alerted Dagger, who immediately realized the implication. If Evelyn had just stolen documents or discovered Project Cerberus secrets, the blowback would be enormous. Seething with frustration, Dagger grabbed his phone and called Carlos Mendoza. The conversation was Dagger, voice tight with anger, detailed how someone, likely Evelyn, had broken into their warehouse and potentially made off with critical information. On the other end of the line, Carlos's cold voice echoed through. "You incompetent fools. She could compromise everything if she hands that data over to the authorities. Handle it, now," Dagger bristled, swallowing his pride. "We will," he promised. "Just say the word, and I'll bring a dozen Reapers to gun her down tonight." Silence hung for a moment. Then Carlos exhaled, every breath containing lethal intent. "A frontal assault might not be enough. We need specialists. My men will take care of her, but you'd better assist them in any way they need. I won't have a single woman dismantling the cartel's plans." A chill ran through Dagger's spine. He understood that meant an external kill team, or cleaners who didn't answer to him. The Reaper's credibility was already in question, after repeated fiascos. Now, the cartel was stepping in to ensure no more mistakes. Carlos ended the call abruptly, leaving Dagger furious and humiliated. He barked at his men to remain on high alert, but he knew it might not matter. This was now the cartel's show. Evelyn Kane, the meddlesome truck driver who had dared challenge them, had become the prime target. While the Reapers scrambled behind the scenes, Evelyn and Titan met Ethan outside, sharing a quick update. Under the dull glow of a single streetlight, Evelyn hurriedly explained everything she'd seen in the office. The graphic pictures, the references to Cerberus, and the possible timeline for Ghost's transfer to a remote lab. Ethan's eyes darkened. "So there's more than just local smugglers at play," he muttered. "This is big. Cartel level big." Evelyn nodded, face grim. "They're turning K9s into living weapons. Ghost is on their list, or worse, already in their clutches. We need to act fast." They decided to head back into town, stopping at a safe location to examine the photos Evelyn had taken. She insisted on driving her own truck, with Titan in the passenger seat, while Ethan followed in his unmarked cruiser. She wanted to avoid drawing attention by traveling together. Halfway back, Evelyn spotted headlights in her rearview mirror that seemed to approach too fast. She tensed, telling Titan to remain alert. She made a sudden turn onto a side street, hoping to lose any potential tail, but the lights kept pace. Sure enough, an SUV, a sleek black model with tinted windows, raced out of an alley, swerving to block the road ahead. Titan barked sharply as Evelyn slammed the brakes, forced to veer into an empty parking lot once used for old delivery trucks. The place was a ghost yard, littered with rusted vehicles and broken concrete. She grabbed her phone, intending to warn Ethan, but realized too late he wasn't behind her. He had taken a different route. As the SUV slid to a halt, 4 men in dark attire leaped out, weapons raised. Unlike the Reapers with their rough leather and patches, these newcomers wore no identifying marks. Their faces were obscured by baseball caps or hooded jackets, and the aura they exuded was one of cold, professional menace. Evelyn felt her pulse surge. These weren't mere bikers. They were likely cartel operatives or hired assassins. Evelyn ducked behind the wheel, quickly scanning for an exit. Titan, ears flattened, growled deeply. The men advanced in tactical formation, fanning out around her. Through the driver's side mirror, Evelyn saw one step forward, brandishing a sleek handgun equipped with a suppressor. She grabbed her own firearm from beneath the seat, checked the chamber, then yanked open the door and slid out. Using the truck's engine block as partial cover, she fired 2 shots at the first assassin. He dove behind a battered pickup in the lot, returning fire with near-silent putts. Bullets pinged against Evelyn's truck, shattering a side mirror. Titan bounded out next, flanking from behind the vehicle. With a surge of muscle, he sprang on one of the assassins who had circled too close. The man cried out, trying to aim downward, but Titan's jaws clamped onto his forearm, forcing the weapon loose. Evelyn heard the muffled yell and seized the opportunity, pivoting around the truck to neutralize a second attacker who was reloading. One of the assassins heaved a tear gas grenade into the open space. White smoke billowed, clouding Evelyn's vision. She coughed, forced to retreat behind a rusted delivery.
"Titan," she shouted through the haze, worried the dog might be disoriented. His responding bark told her he was still fighting somewhere near the far side of the lot. Shots hissed through the thick smog. Evelyn dropped low, searching for something to create an advantage. Her gaze caught a half-full drum of old engine oil near an upended barrel. She looked around, noticing a small, flickering fire from a bullet-riddled piece of wood. An idea sparked in her mind. As she heard footsteps approaching, she seized the small container of oil, heaved it toward the smoldering plank. It crashed with a wet splash for a second. Nothing happened. Then the flames licked across the oil, igniting into a sudden roaring flare that spread across the ground in a wave of heat. 2 assassins cursed, forced to leap back, seizing the moment. Evelyn dashed to the edge of the lot. One assassin got off a shot, the bullet grazing her shoulder. She hissed in pain but kept moving. Titan appeared from the smoke, panting hard, muzzle stained with the attacker's blood. Another figure lay prone on the ground, not moving. Evelyn refocused on the last 2 operatives, both still in the fight. She fired twice, striking one in the leg. He collapsed, shouting. The final man tried to cover his wounded comrade, aiming a rapid burst of suppressed shots at Evelyn. A bullet chipped the van beside her, sending shards of paint flecking out. She felt the sting in her upper arm. Another graze. Titan, sensing her distress, rushed forward. The final assassin realized the tide had turned. He threw what looked like a flash grenade. Evelyn cried out, turning her face away as an intense burst of light and sound disoriented her. By the time her vision cleared, she heard car doors slamming, blinking furious. Evelyn saw the SUV's headlights flick on, the engine revved, and the driver gunned it, swerving around debris. The tires screeched as it sped off into the darkness, leaving 2 of its men behind, one unconscious, the other severely wounded and pinned down by Titan's menacing presence. Evelyn took a shaky breath, wiping sweat and soot from her forehead. The whole firefight couldn't have lasted more than a couple of minutes. Her arm throbbed, warm blood seeping down to her elbow. Still, Titan was alive, and so was she. That was enough for now. She approached the wounded assassin, who clutched his leg and stared at Titan with fear. Evelyn kicked his weapon away. "Who sent you?" she demanded, voice low and furious. He glared up at her. Defiant. "You should already know," he spat. "You're messing with things bigger than you." Evelyn bent down, retrieving a small radio from his vest. The device crackled, and a cold voice rang out. "Are they dead yet? Report." The wounded man refused to speak. Evelyn keyed the radio, letting out a single harsh breath. The voice on the other end continued. "So you're still alive." Evelyn Kane. "Good. This only makes the game more interesting." She recognized that tone. Carlos. Her grip on the radio tightened as a wave of revulsion and anger coursed through her. "Game? You call kidnapping my dog a game?" she hissed. But the line cut off. The cartel's envoy had said enough to confirm they were the ones behind the attack. With the immediate danger past, Evelyn let out a pent-up breath. Titan stood guard over the fallen assassin, fangs bared, as if daring him to try anything. A flash of headlights in the distance signaled an arriving vehicle. Evelyn tensed until she recognized it as Ethan's sedan. He stepped out, revolver in hand, eyes widening at the scene of smoldering patches of fire, bullet-scarred vehicles, and 2 incapacitated assailants. "Jesus." Ethan breathed, scanning her bleeding arm. "Are you all right?" She nodded, though her face was pale.
I'll live, but these aren't just any random hitmen. They're cartel professionals. They tried to kill me before I could do anything with the evidence we got. She gestured at the trembling, wounded man on the ground. He's all yours. Ethan motioned to his backup, who promptly moved in to detain the assassin. Another officer arrived to check the unconscious man, confirming he was alive but in need of medical attention. Evelyn took a moment to slump against Titan, exhaustion churning through her. She let out a shaky laugh, tinged with bitterness. Guess I'm popular now. Ethan rubbed his temple. That intel you stole from the warehouse must be more damning than we thought. He glanced at Evelyn's bleeding arm. We need to get you to a doctor. No arguments. Evelyn grimaced. Fine. But this changes nothing. Ghost is still out there, God knows where. And the cartel just declared open season on me. Titan nudged her, as if in agreement that they shouldn't linger. She gave him a reassuring scratch behind the ears. Despite everything, the burning in her arm, the adrenaline crash leaving her knees wobbly, she remained resolute. She locked eyes with Ethan. We've come too far to back down. If the cartel wants me silenced, that means we're on to something big. Something that might save Ghost and any other dogs they plan to torture. I'm not going to let them scare me off. Ethan nodded, steel in his gaze. Then we'll do this together. But first, you're going to the hospital. We can't rescue Ghost if you bleed out on me. Evelyn allowed a faint, weary grin. Deal. As they prepared to depart, sirens began echoing across the empty lot, signifying more law enforcement en route. The night sky glowed with the faint reflection of city light, and Evelyn wondered how many more nights like this she'd have to endure before finding Ghost and tearing down the twisted Project Cerberus once and for all. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to support. Late evening light filtered through the blinds of Ethan Hayes' office at the Silverbrook police station. The day's hustle had died down, leaving most of the corridors quiet. Yet inside this small room, a furious energy buzzed. Evelyn Kane stood next to a large tactical map pinned to the wall, arms folded tight across her chest. Her shoulders still smarted from the graze wound she'd received when the cartel's assassins tried to take her out in that abandoned parking lot. But she couldn't afford rest, not when Ghost was still somewhere in the clutches of crimson serpents. Ethan spread out the freshly obtained satellite images across the table. Circles and scribbled annotations marked their main target, an isolated research compound deep in the forested hills outside Silverbrook, surrounded by tall chain-link fences crowned with razor wire. It appeared more like a clandestine fortress than any legitimate facility. The approach looked challenging: thick woods on 3 sides, a single paved road leading in, and watchtowers that likely hid armed guards. This, Ethan said grimly, pointing to a large rectangle near the main building, seems to be the central lab. If the intel we seized at the warehouse is right, they're keeping Ghost there. And not just Ghost. There could be other military dogs or even more horrifying experiments. Evelyn clenched her jaw. I won't let them continue. We end this, Ethan. Titan, sitting obediently at her feet, let out a low grunt of agreement. Ethan glanced at the clock. I've called in every favor we have. A special tactical team from our county arrived this morning. Men and women I trust implicitly. We'll coordinate a multi-pronged assault. But let's be clear. Cartel operatives and possibly the remaining Black Reapers will be heavily armed. We have to assume they've prepared for any standard police approach. Evelyn nodded, determined. Then we won't give them a standard approach. They'll expect a frontal attack, so we'll give them one, and use it as cover for the real infiltration. She traced a path on the map with her fingertip, around the rear perimeter, where a steep ravine ended at a tall fence. Let the main team strike from here, she said, pointing to the gatehouse. Make noise. Draw out the majority of guards. Meanwhile, Titan and I go in from the back. We'll slip through the fence, find Ghost, and get out before they know what's happening. Ethan frowned, worrying about her plan's dangers. You'd be behind enemy lines, practically alone. I'll manage, Evelyn replied evenly. I have Titan, and we're used to stealth ops. Besides, this is personal. Ghost saved my life more than once. He's a partner, not just a dog. Ethan sighed, relenting. All right, but if things go sideways, call in the strike team to back you up. No heroics? Evelyn, she pressed her lips into a thin line. I can't promise that, she said quietly. But I understand. A subdued hush fell, replaced by the soft rustle of tactical gear as Evelyn packed her equipment. A semi-automatic rifle, a sidearm, a sheathed combat knife, and lightweight body armor. Titan was fitted with a specialized harness holding a small camera and a comm device, allowing the support team to follow their progress. If the infiltration went smoothly, only minimal bloodshed would be needed. But Evelyn harbored no illusion. Crimson Serpents wouldn't let Ghost go without a fight. Ethan zipped up his own vest, checking the load on his sidearm. "We move at dawn," he announced, finalizing the plan. "Dawn is best. Some men will be off shift. The rest not fully awake. We'll take their front gate with a loud entry. Evelyn, you circle round. Once we have them pinned, you find Ghost. Gather evidence if possible, and signal extraction." Evelyn gave a firm nod, inhaling a steadying breath. "We're bringing him home." Before midnight, the Silverbrook station buzzed with subdued activity. As the plan set into motion, officers checked weapons, tested radios, and loaded flashbangs and breaching charges. Through a side door of the station, a police-issue armored vehicle rolled out into the shadows, ready for the next morning's raid. Evelyn was double-checking her rifle sights in a quiet corner of the armor. Titan sat close, calm yet watchful, as if he sensed the gravity of their mission. Ethan approached, handing her a small earpiece. "We'll keep in contact on Channel 7. Our code word for pulling out is Nightfall. If you're stuck or pinned, say it twice. Nightfall. Nightfall. So we know you need immediate backup." She slipped it into her ear, testing the comm with a soft copy. The line clicked clearly, connecting her to Ethan and the tactical squad. The realism of their operation was sobering. This was no small-time arrest. They were going head-to-head with a criminal empire that specialized in violent intimidation. Nearby, a tall officer with a calm presence, Sergeant Jace, stood briefing a group of SWAT officers on the compound schematic. They would drive the armored vehicle up to the main gate, create a diversion, and draw enemy fire. Meanwhile, Evelyn and Titan would slip behind the lines, using a half-dried creek bed as a path to the fence, then cut through. If all went to plan, they'd catch the facility's defenders in a pinch. As the hours ticked by, Evelyn conferred with Ethan on final details. The severity of the mission weighed on them both. This wasn't just about saving Ghost. It was about dismantling a monstrous program that turned loyal service animals into weapons for a drug cartel. The vow Evelyn had made, never to let any more dogs suffer such a fate, fueled her every breath. At last, in the final quiet moments before sunrise, the operation team gathered in the station's rear parking lot. A hush fell as Ethan offered a few words of encouragement. Then Evelyn shouldered her gear and climbed into an unmarked SUV with Titan. Sergeant Jace led the main squad in an armored truck. The convoy rolled out, headlights off, merging into the early morning gloom. Evelyn's heart thudded. Adrenaline coursed. If everything worked, she'd have Ghost back by noon. If it failed, she shoved the thought aside. There was no room for doubt. Titan pressed his muzzle gently to her hand, as if reassuring her. She let out a shaky exhale and steeled herself for what was to come. The final, most critical battle was about to begin. The first hint of daylight touched the treetops, as the police armored truck rumbled onto a narrow forest road, leading to the secretive compound.
Sergeant Jace manned the turret hatch, scanning for threats, as they approached a tall chain-link barrier topped with razor wire. A roving guard patrol, cartel mercenaries or possibly ex-military contractors, milled near the gate, oblivious to how swiftly the tide was about to turn. Ethan, inside the truck's cabin, gripped the radio. "Teams in position?" he asked, voice steady but taut. Static crackled, followed by a chorus of affirmatives from half a dozen squad cars forming a perimeter behind them. So far, no alarm from inside the lab. "All right," Ethan murmured. "We move." Without warning, the armored truck accelerated, smashing through the gate in a roar of twisted metal. The startled guards sprang into action, firing rifles and shotguns at the advancing vehicle. Bullets pinged off its reinforced plating. The SWAT officers returned fire through the gun ports, an eruption of muzzle flashes lighting the dawn. The air filled with acrid gun smoke and the shouts of men caught off guard. As soon as the barrier gave way, more officers spilled from the rear of the truck, fanning out behind riot shield. They barked commands. "Drop your weapons." "Police," but the defenders, presumably loyal to cartel pay, resisted fiercely.
Gunfire rattled the towering fence. Alarms squealed from inside the compound, red lights strobing along the perimeter walls. From a vantage point deeper in the woods, Evelyn watched the spectacle with racing heart. The diversion was working. Under cover of the noise, she sprinted alongside Titan, winding through the undergrowth to an overgrown fence line. The plan hinged on the bulk of the guards rushing to repel the frontal assault, leaving the rear relatively unguarded. She pressed herself flat against the fence, parted vines, and found the spot they'd scouted. Sure enough, the fence was older here, the metal corroded and easily snipped by her bolt cutters. Titan growled softly, ear cocked, as gunshots echoed from the front. They slipped through the gap, crouching amid tall weeds in the compound's backyard. Evelyn's pulse hammered, but she clung to the knowledge that each step brought her closer to Ghost. The main building loomed ahead, gray concrete walls, high windows, a metal door sealed by an electronic lock. Shouts and sporadic gunfire from the gate indicated the fight was intensifying. She spotted only one guard near the rear loading dock, anxiously peering around the corner as if expecting an attack from behind. Evelyn fired her silenced pistol once, striking him in the leg. He dropped with a cry, and Titan lunged in to disarm him. The guard fell unconscious after a swift blow from Evelyn's gun handle. Now unimpeded, they crept to the metal door. Evelyn tested it, locked. She used a small hacking device Ethan's tech officer had provided. The door beeped once, twice, then clicked open. She slipped inside, Titan on her heel. Behind them, the thunder of the front assault echoed, punctuated by flashbang pops and bursts of automatic fire. Evelyn silently prayed Ethan and the team remained safe. For now, she had to push forward, deeper into the labyrinth of corridors that formed the heart of the cartel's cruel project. Stepping into a dim corridor lined with bare concrete, Evelyn and Titan advanced methodically. Overhead, fluorescent tubes flickered, revealing chipped paint and a series of closed doors. Occasional squeals of an alarm system reverberated, reminding her that time was short. Titan halted at a junction, head low, sniffing the air. His hackles rose, and he jerked his muzzle to the right, a sign he'd picked up Ghost's scent. Evelyn's chest tightened with anticipation. She pressed her ear to the corridor's corner. Hearing frantic footsteps approaching, two men in paramilitary garb emerged. Scanning for intruders, Evelyn dropped to a knee, letting them come within range. Then lunged forward, her combat knife flashed. One man crumpled with a strangled grunt. Titan sprang on the second, knocking his weapon aside and pinning him against the wall with savage force. Evelyn delivered a swift punch to subdue him. The scuffle ended in seconds, barely a whisper among the cacophony beyond these walls. "Good boy," she whispered to Titan, patting his flank. The big dog huffed quietly, as if to say, "We're not done yet." They continued down the hallway, turning left at a junction that led deeper into the facility. Doors flanked them on either side, some locked, some slightly ajar, revealing offices or storage rooms. Evelyn paused at a large set of double doors labeled Lab 2, a digital keypad and a sign reading "Authorized personnel only" hinted this could be a main research area. The corridor behind them flickered with emergency lights. Sporadic gunfire told her the police were making progress. She steeled herself, glancing down at Titan, who sniffed the door and wagged his tail once. Ghost's scent was definitely stronger here. She took a breath, steadied her gun, and mentally counted down 3, 2, 1. Then she opened the door. Evelyn stepped into a large room dominated by stainless steel tables, electronic equipment, and a pervasive smell of antiseptic mixed with the sharper tang of chemicals. The overhead fluorescence buzzed ominously, illuminating a scene straight out of a nightmare. Dog kennels and metallic cages, some open and empty, others occupied by exhausted, haggard canines. Some were muzzled, their eyes glazed with what looked like sedation or shock. A few lay motionless, uncertain if they were still breathing. Her heart twisted. She recognized the battered forms of ex-military dogs like Titan and Ghost. Only these looked lost, stripped of their training, forcibly turned into test subjects. She bit her lip until she tasted blood, rage building in her chest. Before she could move, a familiar voice cut through the sterile gloom. "Evelyn Kane, I was wondering when you'd show up." She spun to see Carlos Mendoza, standing by a large console that displayed vital signs, chemical readouts and video feed. Next to him, Strapped onto a cold metal table lay Ghost. Wires ran from the dog's chest and limbs to the console. Ghost's breathing was shallow, an IV drip inserted into his leg. Evelyn's stomach lurched at the sight of her beloved canine ally bound and vulnerable. "Step away from him," Evelyn snarled, raising her rifle. Her finger hovered near the trigger. If Carlos gave her half an excuse, she'd put him down. Titan, meanwhile, bared his teeth in a menacing rumble, eyes locked on the man who had orchestrated Ghost's abduction. Carlos lifted one hand in a show of mock surrender, though the chilling arrogance in his eyes never wavered. "You're too late," he gloated softly. "We've made significant progress on Ghost here. A few more hours, and his mind wouldn't have been his own. Such a pity. He'd have made a formidable addition to the Cerberus project." Evelyn's blood boiled at his casual tone. Without warning, she aimed at the console and fired, destroying the screens in a shower of sparks and glass. The monitors crackled, alarms squealing more shrilly. If the lab had any chance of continuing their vile work, it would be that much harder without their equipment. Carlos recoiled, but recovered quickly, his upper lip curling with disdain. "You're making quite a mess," he scolded. "Those other dogs in the cage, they might not survive if you blow everything up." Evelyn's gaze flicked to the other canines. Some trembled inside their cages. Half limp, she steadied her rifle, then opened them all. "Now," a bitter laugh escaped Carlos. "I think not. If I'm losing this facility, at least I can salvage the data. Unless, of course, you want to stop me." He gestured with his free hand to an escape door behind him. She recognized the threat. He could flee with any portable drives or final data sets, leaving her with a building set to self-destruct or forcibly purge. In that moment, every second stretched. She could either try to incapacitate Carlos or ensure Ghost's immediate safety by unstrapping him. Titan growled, inching closer to Ghost. But Evelyn needed to neutralize the man behind all this. She pivoted, firing a short burst at Carlos's feet. He dove behind a desk, returning fire with a compact handgun. Evelyn ducked behind a counter, bullets pinging overhead. One stray shot nicked a cage, sending a whimpering canine deeper into a corner. "Tisk," Carlos taunted. "This changes nothing. Even if you free those dogs, the cartel remains. You've simply declared war on a Hydra." Evelyn ignored his provocation. She peered around the edge of the counter, spotting a path to Ghost's table. Carlos had limited vantage from behind the desk. She made a snap decision, gesturing for Titan to circle wide. The dog responded instantly, creeping to flank Carlos. Evelyn fired a few blind rounds to keep him pinned. Then she bolted across the gap, sliding to Ghost's side. Up close, she saw the mild sedation in his unfocused eyes. She tugged at the straps binding him, but they were thick leather. A quick slash with her combat knife severed the first strap. The dog's chest rose in shallow pants. Even in a weakened state, Ghost recognized her, whining softly in relief. Carlos must have sensed her tactic. A bullet whizzed by, smashing into a metal tray. Evelyn shielded Ghost's body with her own, returning fire. In that moment, Titan lunged from behind, knocking Carlos down in a snarl of fang and fury. The man cried out, his gun clattering away. Pinned under Titan's massive weight, Evelyn rushed to cut the remaining straps, freeing Ghost from the table. Gently, she eased him into her arms. His limbs trembled, possibly from the sedation, but the warmth of her presence seemed to calm him. "I've got you," she whispered, tears stinging her eyes. "You're safe now." But the nightmare wasn't over yet. The door behind Evelyn burst open, and Dagger himself staggered in, flanked by two battered Reapers. Blood trickled from a gash on his forehead, presumably from the ongoing firefight outside. His eyes lit with fury upon seeing Evelyn and Titan. "You just don't know when to quit, do you?" he snarled. Evelyn carefully set Ghost on the floor, stepping protectively in front of him. Titan, still pinning Carlos to the ground, glanced up, sensing a new threat. Dagger wasted no time, charging forward with a combat knife drawn. Evelyn intercepted, their blades clashing in a frantic dance of sparks and desperation. Despite his earlier wounds, Dagger fought with brutal aggression. He aimed slashes at Evelyn's torso, forcing her on the defensive. She parried, shifting to keep him away from Ghost. One of his men fired a wild shot, forcing Titan to relinquish Carlos, who promptly scrambled away. Evelyn ducked, ramming her shoulder into Dagger's midsection. They crashed against a metal cart, sending instruments flying. With a savage growl, Dagger locked an arm around her, trying to wrestle her blade free, summoning her last reserves of strength. Evelyn wrenched her combat knife upward, stabbing into Dagger's thigh. He howled, collapsing onto the floor. Before he could recover, she kicked the knife deeper, ensuring he stayed down. In the background, lights flickered, and an automated voice droned warnings about system failures. Ethan's voice crackled in Evelyn's earpiece, announcing the police had secured the outside. She only had minutes before the entire complex might self-destruct or burn, especially if Carlos triggered a failsafe. A voice from the hall shouted, "Evelyn, we have to clear out. The place is rigged. Get out now." She recognized Sergeant Jace. The labs were about to become a death trap. Evelyn scooped Ghost into her arms, ignoring the pain in her side. Titan snarled at the two remaining Reapers, who quickly surrendered when confronted by the enraged K9. Dagger lay on the floor, clutching his wounded leg, cursing Evelyn's name. She couldn't muster an ounce of pity. "Titan, let's move," she commanded, and the three of them rushed out, leaving behind a battered Dagger and presumably the remains of the twisted experiments. With the help of the SWAT team, they evacuated the building. Moments later, a chain reaction of explosions tore through the facility, flames lighting the sky, ensuring no horrific experiment would continue in that wretched lab. Ghost was free. Evelyn could finally breathe again. In the early hours after the inferno consumed the secret lab, Ethan's task force swept across Silverbrook. Freed from the immediate threat of armed cartel henchmen, they launched coordinated raids on every known or suspected Reaper hideout. Bleary-eyed locals woke to the sounds of sirens, witnessing a series of arrests that would spell the end of the once feared biker gang. Officers apprehended dozens of Reapers scattered across safe houses, motels and warehouse corners. Some still sported bandages or bruises from recent skirmish. Others cowered behind locked doors, surrendering rather than face more violence. The message was clear. The Reapers' final stand had failed. With Dagger critically injured and their key leadership in disarray, the gang collapsed like a rotted framework beneath a fresh wind. Locals, long terrorized by these brutes, emerged from their homes to watch as the Black Reapers were loaded into police vans. For the first time in months, maybe years, relief shone on their faces. Jim, the kindly gas station owner, reportedly wept tears of joy upon hearing that the Reapers had finally been crushed. Ethan personally oversaw the arrests, ensuring no vigilantism or undue roughness. The law had prevailed, and it was a victory Silverbrook desperately needed. Evelyn, still nursing bruises, watched from the sidelines in quiet satisfaction. Ghost, though drowsy from sedation, seemed to perk up at the sight of each Reaper hauled off in handcuffs. Titan wagged his tail as though sensing the threat that had overshadowed them was at last extinguished. Somewhere in a hospital bed, Dagger would be cursing Evelyn's name, his gang in ruins. She felt no pity. The man had brutalized her town, stolen her dog, and tried to see her dead. Now justice had found him, but not everyone faced justice that morning. Carlos Mendoza, the architect behind Project Cerberus, had vanished amid the flames and chaos. Reports suggested he'd fled the lab moments before the final blasts, slipping into the dark forest or whisked away by a hidden escape route. The last confirmed sighting placed him driving a sleek car out of state lines, heading south. Despite the destroyed facility, the Crimson Serpents cartel hadn't simply evaporated. They remained a global force, their network stretching far beyond Silverbrook's board. Ethan had already begun coordinating with federal agencies, sharing every scrap of intel gleaned from the lab and the Reapers' warehouses. Evelyn, for her part, knew that while one evil had been uprooted in Silverbrook, a greater menace still lurked out there. She refused to let it gnaw at her peace. If Carlos turned up again, she'd be ready. In the meantime, she'd help Ethan with whatever follow-up investigations the feds required. There was talk of further raids on cartel assets in neighboring states, and possibly a multi-agency task force forming to dismantle the K9 experimentation rings. Amid the swirl of possibility, Evelyn felt a pang of sorrow for the dogs that hadn't survived. Scores of them had been discovered in that smoldering lab, some barely alive, others beyond help. At least the survivors were in safe hands now, receiving veterinary care and a chance to heal. She hoped the memory of the Reaper's cruelty would galvanize law enforcement to keep fighting. Ghost, still recovering from sedation, remained at her side, determined as ever. The sight of him out of that metal harness, no longer attached to tubes or wires, filled her with a fierce gratitude. She silently vowed to ensure no K9 faced the same fate again if she could help it. It took another day before the fires at the lab fully died, leaving a blackened shell of twisted steel and scorched concrete. By then, Evelyn and Ethan were nearly spent from endless paperwork, debriefings and medical checkup. Titan stayed watchful over Ghost, who improved with each passing hour, regaining the edge in his gaze that defined him as a proud military K9. When Evelyn finally returned to her house, char marks from Molotovs still visible on the siding, she realized how different everything felt. The heaviness looming over Silverbrook had lifted, replaced by cautious optimism. Neighbors waved from across the street. Local business owners breathed easier, free from Reaper intimidation. Inside, Titan and Ghost paced around, reacquainting themselves with their territory. Evelyn lowered herself onto the couch, wincing at the bruises that flared whenever she moved. Ghost limped over, pressing his head against her leg in a gentle apology for the worry he'd caused. She ruffled his ears, tears pricking her eyes. "Never scare me like that again," she murmured. They were battered, but victorious. With the Reapers behind bars, the immediate threat had passed. Yet Evelyn couldn't shake the sense that bigger battles lay ahead. Carlos Mendoza was still out there. The cartel wouldn't just shrug off the loss of their lab and keep quiet. Sooner or later, they might come for Silverbrook again, or for her. One afternoon, as the sun cast long beams through the living room window, Evelyn watched Titan and Ghost doze on the floor. She felt their quiet strength, their unwavering loyalty. A phone call from Ethan earlier that day confirmed that federal agents would be contacting her soon, possibly recruiting her help in continuing the fight against the Crimson Serpents. She hadn't said yes or no. All she knew was that she and her dogs were ready. If duty called, leaning forward, she pressed a hand against Ghost's flank. "We're not done," she whispered, "but as long as we stand together, no one can break us." A faint wag from Titan indicated he shared her conviction. The story wouldn't end here. There was always another horizon to protect, another threat to face. Yet for this moment, she allowed herself the quiet victory of having saved her best friend and freed Silverbrook from darkness. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this story. We'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let us know your favorite part. If you enjoyed the journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more captivating stories like this one. And don't miss out. Hit the notification bell so you're always updated on our latest content. Your support truly means the world to us. Dr. Alara scanned the vitals. Adrenaline this high, that's a soldier's instinct kicking in. She wasn't angry, she was calculating. Briar Knox didn't raise her voice. She raised her stance, and beside her, Titan and Ranger stood like stone guardians from another world. Briar Knox didn't raise her voice. She raised her stance, and beside her, Titan and Ranger stood like stone guardians from another world. Titan lunged not with rage, but with precision. The kind of fury only loyalty could shape. Deputy Maddox replayed the gas station footage. That biker didn't just pick the wrong woman, he picked a sleeping storm. Deputy Maddox replayed the gas station footage. That biker didn't just pick the wrong woman, he picked a sleeping storm.